Hey guys, welcome to my Ori and the Will of the Wisp review. I'm sorry it took a bit of time, I just had some things going on in my life, however, we finally got it out. Firstly, let me just say, if you haven't bought this game, what the hell are you doing, and why the hell not? I'll give my rating at the end, but I highly recommend that you go out and buy this beautiful piece of artwork. It is amazing. Now, starting off, I'm gonna admit that before playing this game, I didn't actually like side scrollers or platformers, and in fact, I found them kind of boring. I don't think besides maybe one or two of them that I've ever actually finished one completely without quitting halfway due to boredom. I think the only one ever off memory that I've actually finished is Earthworm Jim, if you guys even know what that is. So when I saw Will of the Wisp at, I think it was 2019 E3, I thought meh, It looked cool artistically and aesthetically, it was pleasing to my eye. But once I saw it was like a platformer side scroller, I lost interest and forgot about it. Oh, I'll tell you right now, I was so wrong. I saw it release on Steam, and the art style once again drew me in because it looks beautiful. And since then, I've played through it non-stop. It was a great time. It was a complete surprise, and a pleasant surprise at that. Now, let's actually start off going into some of the points that were positive about this game. Obviously first, the art, the graphics, the style, just in general of this game. Will of the Wisp has one of the most beautiful and honestly breathtaking art directions that I've personally ever seen in most games. And the game developers, I think it's from Moon Studios and Microsoft, who also supported them, honestly should give themselves a pat on the back. It was jaw-dropping. Everything from Ori's actual model to the transitions from different environments to the particle effects flying around the screen and a lot more, this game was gorgeous at times. Also, talking about environments again, or different biodomes if you will, in this game kept me intrigued for my 10 to 20 hour so journey. And each one added a refreshing take on how the game changes up some of its mechanics and how it works with traversing each level. The levels would go from simply needing to jumping far enough from some environments to swimming through water levels, all the way to frozen wastelands and even spider-infested marshes. Each one of these environments you visit added like a flavor of discovery to be found, and I ended up exploring far more than I thought I would. I honestly think this is the first time I've been bothered to actually explore in a platformer, and stranger enough, I really enjoyed it. Even better, the models for some of the more giant bosses and characters in this game actually made me double check to see if I was correctly looking at this and the scale compared to you. There's giant frogs, giant bears, spiders with giant mama spider, just to name a few. It was times like this when I encountered some of these creatures and I was just thinking, wow, this is impressive. I actually am having a good time here. Of course, although it's probably the most prominent and dominant feature as to why you buy this game, the art and graphic style isn't the only thing that needs to be complemented in this game. The sounds and audio in this game are done to a fantastic level. Some of the tracks playing in the background of levels change my mood depending on the specific level, and how the audio might dim or go eerily quiet before a boss battle tends to get you very tensed up and you know a big fight's coming. If this combination of sound and art that made this game was just judged off this alone, it'd be a 10 out of 10 for me. It was that great. These two combined just made the game feel alive and refreshing at times for me. I actually saw a quote from someone, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who you were. It was just, I think, a YouTube comment or something along those lines. But they said you pretty much could take a screenshot in this game at any point in time and it'd be a great background picture for your desktop, and he was right. This game also has some very simple yet effective mechanics. The way the game works is you usually have a passive ability and active abilities that you can assign to slots to use. You collect these by traversing the world and exploring. These abilities may come in the form of, let's say, shards that you collect that then give you the abilities. You may get them from these special light trees where you absorb the light from it and gain its ability. You can also buy abilities and skills to use from the vendor with orbs that you collect from enemies or just finding around the world exploring. It's thanks to these that you can progress the story as you find and unlock these different skills or abilities. It kind of feels like older Zeldas, if you will, where If you need to beat one dungeon, you need to acquire the weapon first in that dungeon, or piece of equipment that then allows you to get through the rest of the dungeon and then finally fight the boss, to then move on to the next piece of equipment slash area that you will do. There's also, I'd say, a hefty amount of side quests to do here, activities, which actually, if you do certain ones such as the shrine trials, they will give you another slot to put your passive abilities into if you can successfully beat these without dying. It's great, and I had a fun time doing these shrine trials. Even if I tend to suck at platformers and did die more than I should have, I'm probably not going to show how many deaths I had throughout this journey. you can guess. This side content should be more than ample enough, I think, to keep the player invested in exploring the world that Moon Studios has built here. Now, moving on to the actual story of Ori and the Will of the Wisp. It's a story that begins with you raising a hatchling with some companions, where after doing some research, I actually found out that this hatchling is actually the antagonist's daughter from the first Ori, which is Ori and the Blind Forest, I believe. And as you go through most of the story, something happens. I won't go into too much. It's not like a massive spoiler, but something happens to you and your newest friend, and you must go save her. Now, if you were to look at it just like that, it doesn't seem like a great story. But Will and the Wisp was actually a lot darker and even more bittersweet than I imagined it would be for a game which isn't even marketed at full price. There were times where I felt my heart move a little when certain things happened to certain characters through the story, and I won't spoil it, but I was not expecting that kind of end. It was a very bittersweet ending for me, which I enjoyed. So let me just say, if you enjoy bittersweet stories with some darker moments, you'll have a great time here with this story. Some of the dialogue though, between characters could use a bit more spicing up. They all felt kind of one-dimensional to me at times, but maybe that's what gave the story its darker charm. They were just straight to the point and no beating around the bush. Now, this game was great. It's great, and it's hard to point out any flaws that I had with it. However, it did have a few when I was playing that I encountered. Starting off firstly, I did have my fair share of bugs with this game. Not game-breaking crashes, more funny ones, and to be honest, like, it's not even that bad, but I still felt like I had to mention them, even if I laughed at a few of them. There was also this weird audio bug I kept getting every now and again, where the audio would just cut out and blur from time to time, giving me a kind of shock when it did happen. Now, I'm not sure if this was just on my end or other people have experienced it, but I feel like I should just mention it still, just in case. I'm going to throw in a clip somewhere in here just showing off the audio bug, just so you guys can see. Another, I'd say more significant problem I had was the lack of enemy diversity. Now, not in the bosses, but just your everyday enemies. Once you've encountered a certain type of enemy, you'll run into that same type with maybe a different color variation, or they might give that same enemy a shield. You'll come across the same slug looking enemy, that same fucking one that jumps, and those fucking wasp enemies, in just slightly different color variations over and over and over again. With two or more of them thrown in there as well, other enemies I can't remember off the top of my head. It didn't make me want to quit or anything, but I just got to the point where I'd avoid them at all costs because I just got bored of seeing those enemies. But the game wasn't full priced, and with how much other things are going for it, and how amazing it is at times, I could easily forgive those things in the end. Also, I found that the controls really did suck at times on PC, mainly during segments where you're being chased and you have to dig through sand and then traverse other terrain in a very quick manner. I found myself getting stuck on walls, or part of walls I should say, then bumping into other objects, which resulted in me dying as I'm trying to run away. And sometimes Ori just didn't listen to me when I was telling him to dig in fast-paced situations, resulting in him just standing there. Now, once again, this was very specific at times, but when it did happen, it was an annoyance, and it did kind of piss me off. You can definitely tell that this game would have been 100 times easier on a controller than on keyboard and mouse. It just felt like it was built for that. Moving on through though, there was another problem I had, and it was to do with the major boss battles. Now, visually and audio, these boss battles were great. They were amazing. But my problem came from the actual fights you had with them and the mechanics used. I found myself using the same tactics to fight and beat each and every one of them, which was a bit of a letdown at times. And what I basically mean by that is there's an ability which allows you to grab onto any projectiles and then reflect it and then launch yourself in the opposite direction. Basically, all these major boss battles tend to have bosses that launch projectiles at you, which these projectiles do far more damage than any of your abilities. And then when you reflect it back at the enemies, I just found myself just doing absurd amount of damage while fundamentally being invincible at times. Where it just boiled down to me reflecting their projectile back at them, doing major damage, and me not taking any. It made meleeing useless at times, I feel, and I'm pretty sure there's also a melee ability that you can acquire which allows you to hit away projectiles, but it's fundamentally useless and redundant with how broken this ability is you can get. Now, I'm positive that this was a mechanical decision they made for boss battles and combat, especially with what you do in the last segment of the last boss battle, which I won't spoil. But I would have liked it if these giant boss battles didn't all require, or didn't all shoot projectiles, which you then could just basically revert back to them and destroy them. This is more likely just my personal opinion and probably not a flaw for most people, but every person has things they like and don't like, and I just wish most of the major boss battles didn't come down to waiting there, sitting, dodging, and then as soon as they shoot a projectile at you, you just reflect it and then kill them. Now, of course, you can challenge yourself and try and beat these bosses without actually using this tactic. However, be honest with yourself, if you had to fight these bosses and you can use a tactic that you know works effectively, you're gonna use it most of the time. It's not like you'd see something there and just ignore it. Anyway, although I brought up these points, in contrast to everything, realistically, they're minor. Ori and the Will of the Wisp is great. It's a must own. It's not even at full retail price, which makes it even better. For some people, they would have been waiting for this game for a long time, and they are obviously a lot smarter than I am, because I let this go by, and I was going to let it go by, and it was only because of the art style which drew me in that I finally picked it up, and now I can highly recommend. You know, I did mention this before, but the only other platform I've ever enjoyed is Earthworm Jim. Just because of how fun and stupid it was at the time, I'm gonna definitely have to rethink that now that I've played Ori and the Will of the Wisp. Now, the final verdict for Ori and the Will of the Wisp is a very high 8 out of 10. When I say high, I mean very high. I don't like rating with points like 8.9, but based off the example you just heard me say, you know what I'd rate it if I could. If someone was to rate this game a 9, or even a 10, I wouldn't argue with you about it. Frankly, what I've played here is amazing, and anyone's really justified to rate this 8 or above. This game was a much needed surprise for me, and I'm super glad I picked it up. The aesthetics, the sound, the story points in this game which make your eyes water at times, with its bittersweet feelings. This game is great, and now I see what all these people who are raving on about are actually talking about. It's just for me that mainly the problems I brought up before with some clunky controls during certain chase segments, some minor bugs, repetitive enemies, and mostly using the same tactics during big boss battles is what brought it down to an 8 for me. However, what did you guys think of Ori and the Will of the Wisp? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Have you not played it yet? If so, go and play it. Let me know below, and as always, thank you for watching.